people and locals. I'm about to call Jackie Miller from the Ottawa Citizen, who wanted an interview. And much like the interview with Julian Newman in the United States, I thought it would be a good idea to, allow everybody some insight, see how an interview goes with legacy media behind the scenes, and then we'll be able to do a comparative analysis between the conversation that we have and the final product that ends up in the Ottawa Citizen. So I thought this could be a great opportunity for legacy media to shine and to show that there is still some objectivism. So let me call her now. Hope she answers. Imagine she doesn't. Did all this for nothing. Hello?
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Jackie?
Good. Thanks so much. I know how busy you are, so...
Busy is an understatement.
Oh, I can imagine. So here's what I'll do, if it's okay with you. I'll ask you just a few quick questions I need for my story.
Okay.
Because as I said, it's going to be looking at, a whole bunch of people, probably 6 or 7. And then after that, if there's time, I would love to talk political philosophy and strategy with you.
Okay.
If you have time.
Yeah, I got a little bit of time.
Okay. Where are you now? Are you still in Massachusetts?
No, I am now in Toronto. I'm at home, and I'm going to be going down to New Jersey. As soon as we're done this interview, I'm going to hop in, grab my bag, hop in my car, go to my truck, and head down south.
Excellent. Okay. So I think I know the answer to this question, but obviously you're still driving a truck?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing a number of things. I'm obviously working on promoting Honking For Freedom. I'm getting a bunch of invitations to speak and attend with speakers in more in the United States, actually. Working with a couple of independent media journalists that are working on exposing how the convoy was sabotaged, and the network of people who kind of collaborated to make that happen, which is kind of fascinating. Just about to get ready into fundraising this $450 million lawfare harassment suit. And,
Just before can I ask you about that? That was one of my questions. I know that you're not being represented by the JCC, so are you having to raise your own funds to defend yourself in the civil lawsuit?
Yes, ma'am. Not only myself, but the vast majority of Freedom Convoy organizers are as well. The JCCF is exclusively representing, I think, 2 people. They've raised $5 million for the truckers and for the trucker organizers, but amazingly, none of us are seeing a dime of it because we've decided to go with our own council because we don't have any faith in the council that the JCCF has chosen. So we're all in a little bit of a pickle.
That's, I'm interested in that story as well. So Tamara Leach and Chris Barber are the only 2 who are being represented?
I believe so. I think they just got a couple of other people yesterday that might have joined as well. I was in the truck while people were sending me messages, so don't hold me to that. That was speculation, but I'll find out later on, probably later on today, what's going on.
No, I know they had, during the convoy, they had offered free legal representation to people. So, and I know there's a lot of conflict among various people over their role. So are they, is it basically up to you and other people whether you want to accept their offer, or has the offer been withdrawn for legal representation in the civil case? Because you don't face criminal charges, I understand.
No, I don't. And I was never given any offer. I was given a retainer during the convoy where they were supposed to represent us in the class action suit. And then John Carpe decided, we're also going to take over messaging and strategy and all that sort of stuff. And I said, hey, this is great that you want to help us with the class action suit. But we're doing pretty good with messaging. We've gotten this global. We don't need any nonsense. So then he, as soon as the convoy was over, he canceled my retainer. And then they apparently told the rest of the board members, if you don't listen to what we say, then we're going to cancel your free legal representation as well. So it was used kind of as a threat.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you're not on the board anymore, but you are a member. I'm not quite sure the distinction. Maybe you could explain it to me.
I don't know. I got to be honest. I don't really know. I don't know. I don't really care. It's all kind of a game. Nothing is formalized. It's just kind of they've always been making up the rules as they go along, and it's been completely dominated by lawyers who have connections to political parties. So, to be entirely honest, when I was no longer a board member, there was a part of me that was saying, you know what, I don't need to be part of this clown show. This is not going to end very well.
Okay, so that was, I think, way back last February when you were taken off the board, correct?
Yeah, I think it was the 28th of February, if I'm not mistaken. But then it was funny. Then during the Mariva injunction, because money was involved, then magically I had legal representation again. So then, okay, so now I have, because a retainer is just a payment process, right? But if somebody is sending you privileged emails, then they are representing you. So that happened throughout.
Did they ask you if they were representing you, or just send you the emails and under the assumption that they were representing you?
They just sent me the emails under the assumption. They called me. They said, "Oh yeah, we've got this guy Norm Groot, another lawyer who is politically connected, and he's going to represent you in the Mariva injunction." I was like, "Okay, well, I guess then we can just ignore the threatening email of canceling a retainer, and I guess we're all working together again." Okay, fine. And they worked through the Mariva injunction. And then I found out on August 15th when Keith Wilson showed up for court, he was asked, are you representing Benjamin Dichter? And he said no, which was quite surprising to me. But it's a good thing I already had started speaking with other counsel because, like I said, it's always make the rules up as they go along. So I figured I probably would have to hedge my bets and get somebody else just in case who I trust. He was acting.
Retainer, but then when they showed up in court, it was Keith Wilson, and he said, "No, I'm not representing."
Yeah,
how it worked?
That's right. This is how he was He's working as an agent for Keith Wilson in Ontario. And what was frustrating for me, this is why I was so annoyed during my testimony in the commission, is because Keith Wilson said under oath during the commission that I don't know what happened to the Bitcoin, which was part of the Mariva. That was my end of the Mariva injunction, myself and Mr. St. Louis. He said, I don't know, Keith Wilson, don't know what happened to the Bitcoin, which was shocking. Perhaps he forgot or he's just doing too many things at once. But the person who received the seed phrase or password, if you want to call it, for the Bitcoin was Norm Groot, Keith Wilson's agent, and they filed it with the escrow agent. So they actually took it and submitted it to the escrow agent. But then under oath, he turns around and says, "Oh, I don't know what happened to it." Oh, okay, so did you take my... I mean, it's not even a matter of opinion. It's a matter of public record. It was just quite shocking to hear that. That's why I was so annoyed in my testimony. Myself and several others. So the original board had 7 members, and then they added a couple of people after, and then they were also removed and whatever. But of the original 7, only 2 remain.
Right. So you would have the people who are now not represented.
That's right.
Belton, Chatty, Rose.
Yep. Yeah. I think Sean is still Sean and Miranda are still on the board because they take orders well, but the rest of us, Chris Guerra, that's right, yeah.
1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, I don't remember the rest of them by memory, but basically, the majority. I have actually I'm making a big chart here at my home office of who's That's
It's a soap opera, isn't it?
Different colors. It is a soap opera. I know. I can tell from social media.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I would tell you is the only sort of friction really comes from the people who, I call it the plane from hell that landed into Ottawa that was going to save us. That's where all the friction is. But all the rest of us, now that time has, I mean, we never really had a lot of friction with each other, especially since I just kind of did my own thing. And we've all reconnected over the past 8 months, and everybody started comparing stories and realizing, wow, they were all lying to each other, to us. As soon as somebody would leave the room, they would lie about somebody, and then that person would leave the room, they'd lie about the other person. Like, it was complete. It's what you see in party politics frequently, right?
Yeah, although there seems to be a lot of conflict between, I know it's all partly related to the law firm and the money and so on, but between Tamara Leach and Chris Belton, between Bridget and Chris Barber, between anyway, there seems to be a lot of just generalized conflict.
Well, because
social media.
as I tried to indicate in my testimony, both, which was frustrating because it's a Q&A. I couldn't get up there and do a vlog and tell my opinion sort of thing. But Chris, I take what Chris Barber and Tamara say with a grain of salt because they both are under criminal charges. They're both very, very scared, as the rest of the board was very scared as well. They were constantly being threatened with losing their legal representation, so they've come in line and they're just repeating what they're told to repeat. And I can sympathize with that position. I understand. I understand it's scary, but at some point, you have to pull the plug and realize that maybe these people don't have my best interests at heart, right?
Okay, and they're facing both criminal and civil charges. So,
That's right.
yeah. Okay, so you're how are you raising the money for to defend yourself against this civil lawsuit?
Well, we're about to, in the very near future, we're going to be launching fundraisers specifically about that. We need to kind of see how things play out, because the class action suit has not even been certified yet. I'm sure you noticed, right? Yeah, so we're still not in certification part, but I want to just make sure we know we're fundraising around something and what the specific goal is and why. But I do have a rather large following on my Substack that are all very, very supportive. And so shortly, we're talking about all of this right in this period of time. So we'll be doing something soon.
Okay. So you help with the Bitcoin fundraising campaign for the convoy, I understand. That's your specialty.
Yeah, I mean, I was the one person on the involved in Freedom Convoy who's, aside from a number of truckers actually, but amongst the organization, administration, what do you want to call it, who actually understood Bitcoin. And I found out recently from a Bitcoiner in a Twitter space that he had reached out to Tamara Leach in the middle of in January, before anybody arrived in Ottawa, when they were driving across the country. And he said, I'm a Bitcoiner. We want to raise money for you. We know you're using GoFundMe. They're going to freeze your money. I didn't know any of this, by the way, till 2 weeks ago. And he asked Tamara. He spoke to Tamara Leach when she was in the truck with, I think Chris was with her at the time, and she said, "I need real money. I don't need video game money," which is the typical response from people who don't. I don't fault her from that. She doesn't know what Bitcoin is, right? And so when we were in Ottawa, somebody came across me. I think they saw one of my interviews, and they saw on my Twitter account that I had hashtag Bitcoin. So they reached out to me. They said, "Hey, are you a Bitcoiner? I'm like, "Yeah, a quiet one, but yeah, for years." And they said, "Okay, well, let's come. We want to come to your hotel. We want to meet with you and help you." And I said, "Sure. Okay, great." And so in the middle of chaos, at about 15 minutes, they came up, and there was 15 of them. One of them was the kid who Pierre Polyev did some Bitcoin events with, who owns the Tahini restaurant in London. He was one of the 15. And they came in and they said, "Listen, we want to help you with Bitcoin." And I said, "Great, I know what Bitcoin is. I'll try to tell the rest of the board and see how they respond." They didn't respond well. And I said, go do your thing anyways, and we'll figure all this out in the future and how it works, because I knew it was an important hedge if we had any sort of issues with GoFundMe, which I thought we would. And the reason I thought we would is because I suggested early on when we arrived in Ottawa, I suggested that, hey, perhaps we need somebody who has experience in, in big finance, somebody who understands SWIFT, somebody who can move millions of dollars. Like, I tried to explain that this is not regular retail banking. I have some friends that are very wealthy. I understand that world. And I said, I've been approached by somebody I know. He's an investment banker. I trust him. I've known him for quite a while. He's got 3 lawyers. They're willing to fly here to help us and explain everything. And if we want to hire them, we can. If we don't want to hire them, we don't have to. But they just believe in the cause. And this particular person is a Canadian who lost everything in Venezuela. So he understands, the political implications of what we're seeing in Canada. And I was told 3 times. I brought it up. Said, no, it's okay. We'll deal with it. And I said, that's not how this type of real money works. It's a different world than we live in. And so when they came to me with Bitcoin, I thought, well, chances are we're not going to have success with GoFundMe, and there might be problems. So let's. I said to them, yeah, sure, guys, I'm here to support you, whatever you got. And they really took it on themselves. And they had it was a lot of work. It was very, very stressful for them, but they managed to make it work somehow and at least get some money to some of the truckers, which, it ended up with a few truckers in tears because some of them thought they were going to lose everything. They were late on their truck payment and all that sort of stuff. So it really had a positive impact on them.
Okay. So, I mean, to summarize all that, as I must do for this short article, I mean, it would be fair to say that you helped with Bitcoin fundraising. I understand there's a lot of people involved and so on.
Yeah, I helped get the word out. I helped to, I went to the board to say, hey, people are raising money for Bitcoin for us. And they responded with, that's for criminal activity. Like, no.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were very hostile.
The word promote, you help promote it.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't want to imply that you were doing the thing. But I think that's one question that I know at one point I remember seeing live streams, and I'm sorry I don't remember exactly when it was, exactly during the convoy or slightly after, with Kyle Kemper saying that he was kind of in charge of the Bitcoin fundraising for the convoy. Was he a key person?
No, not as far as I know. I have 2 chapters. Yeah, I have 2 chapters in my book on Bitcoin, honkingforfreedom.com, by the way. I'm sure you've seen it. But that explains, the people that were working behind the scenes that were helping. And these were people across political disciplines, which was really nice. It was nice to see that this was not a partisan issue, that this was just people who supported freedom, whether they're left, they're right, they're liberal, they're progressive, whatever. It was a whole bunch of, a whole range of people, which was great to see.
Okay. So you're still driving a truck when you have time.
Yep.
Your book, you're still doing your podcast. You still have time to produce other podcasts as well?
Yep. We just released one a couple of nights ago. We got another one coming up on Sunday, and I keep busy.
Yeah. Okay. Now I wanted to get your general opinion on this so-called reunion in Winnipeg. I know from listening to your live stream that you do not support the idea of another convoy, whether it's to mark the 1-year anniversary or for any other reason, because you think it would just create a boogeyman for the political classes and the government to exploit and help, divide people into left-right silos, and the fake mainstream media would then build a narrative around the evil truckers. So don't take the bait. That's what I understand from your live stream.
Yes.
So what's the point? Because, what are you going to protest in your own words? You don't like the government. I don't like the government either. That's what elections are for. Is that a fair kind of summary of your view on another convoy and or this reunion, which it's not clear what it is actually. It's being billed as the unity.
Yes, I would with one asterisk. So, because I've been in touch with many of these people across the country, and we've talked back and forth, and I've suggested. What's that?
You mean the people who are organizing the Winnipeg event when you say you've been in touch, or just in general with people in the movement?
Just in general, people in the movement. Some of them might be involved. This Winnipeg event initially started. They wanted to do something to Ottawa. So I got on the phone for a week, as many people as possible, say, don't help the government. And so then it became a Winnipeg event of some sort, which, okay, fine. You know, as long as they're not in Ottawa, I'm happy. But my big asterisk was, and I suggested to many of them, that what we should be celebrating is February 14th, Valentine's Day. Our protest was about peace, love, unity, and freedom. Valentine's Day is the epitome of the day of love. It's also the day that Justin Trudeau and the Trudeau government invoked the Emergency Measures Act, or as I explained to my friends who are in the United States, Canada's equivalent of martial law. So while the government chose hate, violence, and oppression and beating its citizens, we're going to get together every year now, and we're going to celebrate love and unity and the spirit of the convoy and all us coming together. So that's what I'm trying to get as many people as possible to go to the, like, it's particularly in rural communities where, you know, we can bring 10, 15 trucks together in a town square and have a barbecue and events and dancing and celebrating our freedoms that many countries in the world don't have, that sort of thing. So that's what I'm trying to encourage people to do. And if other people want to have other protests, I'm not going to tell people what to do. It wasn't my place or any of our place to tell people what to do. We just tried to guide people. And the same thing with whatever protests they have to celebrate the annual event. Just don't get violent, don't get cruel, focus on love and unity and reaching out to people across the political aisle. Don't demonize them, because that's not what the spirit of the Freedom Convoy was.
Okay, so I know you talked about that on your podcast as well. Any idea whether anyone's taking you up on your suggestion of having February 14th kind of community celebrations to drive home the contrast between the convoy and the invocation of the Emergencies Act?
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of DMs from people, and a couple of messages have popped up online suggesting exactly that. And I think as we get closer and closer to that date, we might see more and more people gravitate to that sort of messaging. If in terms of people specifically organizing it, I mean, as you can tell, I'm a little bit busy, right? So I can't organize stuff, but as people call me, and, you know, I have some people in rural BC that I'm very close with, truckers, who are trying to put something together as well in various jurisdictions across the country. So I think we'll see more of that as we get closer to February 14th. But it's difficult for people because, you know, a lot of people, there's still a lot of anxiety and angst for how they were treated for 2 years, that they were not citizen. They felt as though they were second-class citizens. But I keep trying to encourage them that, you know, don't take the bait. Anger is easy. Love is difficult. But focus on the latter, because that has a lot more long-term benefit.
Okay. Have you heard any chatter about any kind of event in Ottawa on anniversary? I haven't really, other than, you know, maybe a few people from the Fringe Friday group might, you know, go up to the hill with their flags. But I at least on social media, that's the only kind of evidence that I have. Obviously, I'm a lot of these groups don't talk to the mainstream, so kind of relying on social media. Have you heard anything at all?
The only thing I've heard the only thing I've heard is a couple of small groups, individuals want to go to commemorate, and there's all different dates, so I don't know which date they're choosing.
That's another challenge.
Yeah, exactly, right? So maybe every group's going to take a different day. I don't know. But, you know, small groups of people that just want to get together, who were on the street together for 3 weeks, got to know each other, formed friendships, and just say a few words for 20 minutes, a half hour, whatever it's going to be, and remember to love each other and peaceful and all that sort of stuff, and honor the soldiers. I think one of them wants to do something near the war memorial. And that's it. But there's no, like, organized event. There's no big thing going in. Like, I think everybody understands that doesn't help the freedom movement. All that does is help the government. And if they want a change in government, then they need to stop taking the bait. And I think most people understand that.
Okay, crystal ball time. What do you think the kind of lasting legacy is of specifically the Freedom Convoy protest in Ottawa?
Well, I think it's going to be Canada's Woodstock moment. And I think, like many things in life, we overestimate things in the short term, and we underestimate things over the long term. And over the long term, I think, is when you're going to see a shift. And that's why I wrote this book. That's why John and I put this together and did a timeline to try to make it as accurate as possible and tell many different stories beyond just mine. Because I think over the next 5-10 years, when the current political climate has changed, when you no longer have the Trudeau, this is Mark calls them the Trudeau regime, but when the Trudeau government is out of power and the anxiety of government or policy is a completely different basket, I think all the sort of, the apprehension to talk about convoy from people who know it was peaceful and they know it was loving, but because they're towing a political line, they're not going to say it. Well, 5 years from now, things will be different. And you know what else I think might happen is what happens if we have, because the government has set a precedent now that if you have a protest, it's okay for the government to violently oppress you, freeze your bank accounts, and do anything they want to destroy this protest movement. Well, what's going to happen if in the future there's a conservative government and the people on the other side, on the left side or on the liberal side, don't like what the conservative government is doing and they want to have a protest? I think that's when you'll see that 180-degree shift from people who were against the protest will read this book and understand the truth of what went on, and then all of a sudden they'll start to have a positive perspective. Our memory's biased towards the positive, and we might feel anxiety in the short term now, but as time goes on, we start to remember all the good stories, and that's why I keep trying to remind people, we had 3 saunas, a soup kitchen, a hot tub, barbecues on every corner, feeding the homeless. The Sikh community came with food containers even, so they were making food and handing out with cutlery and stuff. Like, it was brilliant. And I think those are going to be the stories that even the legacy media, over the long term, once the politicized climate that we're in shifts, they will then shift over to start to celebrate and talk about what happened during the Freedom Convoy. It's just going to take time.
Okay. I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. I know you talk a lot about the experience of the people in the protest, particularly around Parliament Hill with the bouncy castle and the saunas and the kind of celebratory party atmosphere. Now, as of course a lot of people in Ottawa, or some people in Ottawa, especially the ones that live downtown, had a very different experience. Now, do you incorporate that into your kind of explanation of the convoy? I mean, every event has nuances, obviously, and people experience it in different ways. And I know that your emphasis is on the experience of the people in the protest.
Yeah.
What about the people who say they were really bothered? Some of them say they were traumatized by the honking and the crowds and just being afraid, basically. And I think that was more on the side streets, not so much on Wellington Street, because people in Ottawa are used to having protests on Wellington Street. There's, in the summer months before the pandemic, there was several a day sometimes. Mm-hmm. So how do you incorporate their experiences in your storytelling about convoy?
I think they're a politicized fringe minority that are suffering from mass hysteria. I think that's what that is. And something that's interesting about it is when you see the the drone footage of all the people that were around Parliament Hill and that were celebrating there, like, who do you think those people were? Those were Ottawa residents, the vast majority of them. There was a bunch of truckers, obviously, but those were all Ottawa residents. And, a good example was, I think you've been watching my stuff, I'm Jewish. One of the, despite a prime minister, if I can say the prime minister blackface, inferring that we were a bunch of white supremacists. I had a rabbi every day trying to chase me to put, he was a wonderful guy, to put on tefillin. And his congregation was coming every Sunday to hear the speeches from Pastor Hildebrand and the pastor from Quebec. And you had, a multitude of different religious denominations that were there. And this religious community, this religious Jewish community, was out there as well. And they are Ottawa citizens. Now, there is a lot of people who are Ottawa citizens who seem to work for the Liberal Party, have a vested interest in the liberal bureaucracy, I guess. But I see so many of these disingenuous narratives. The other one is, the residential area. Like, it's downtown Ottawa. Just because you put a condo building in the middle of a commercial sector doesn't make that a residential area. It makes it a commercial area with some residential properties there. And the one that really, resonated with me most was when people complain about the honking. And maybe I'm different because I've lived in Latin America and in the third world, and I've lived in dangerous places. It's embarrassing how entitled and spoiled people are in Ottawa. It really is. Rupa Subramania said to me, she said, I don't understand, and she lives there. She said, I don't understand the people who are trying to, promulgate this narrative honking. She said, I grew up in Mumbai. It reminded me like an average day in Mumbai because there's honking there all the time. And I said, yeah, Mexico City is the same way. But that's how spoiled we've become and entitled in Canada. And it's embarrassing. It really is embarrassing.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to say about, what the legacy of the Freedom Convoy, what happens next? The mandates are gone, as you know, pretty much. You talk a lot about, in your podcast, about the political classes. Actually, I wanted to ask you what you mean by that. I understand from listening to you that you mean all politicians, basically all political parties, and that they are equally, I don't want to use the word corrupt, but you certainly say that they seems to be the political climate, or maybe it's more of a political culture, is about to collapse. Can you explain what you mean by that? Who are the political classes in your view?
Well, for example,
political parties.
Yeah. For example, we've seen many times where Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau are hanging out together, smashing or criticizing the Freedom Convoy. We see the emails of Candice Bergen and Justin Trudeau collaborating together and agreeing the Freedom Convoy needs to leave Ottawa. Or, from my experience in the Conservative Party, one of the primary lobby firms that the Conservative Party subcontracts to was co-founded by Justin Trudeau's chief of staff, Katie Telford. So this is one apparatus of people who don't seem to understand they are public servants. They work for us. And the more they continue down this road of authoritarianism, the more it's going to boomerang, and it's going to cost them their political careers. And people are going to be looking for new political parties. This is how new political parties form in any country. And they can create as many proxy organizations and as many NGOs, as many YouTubers as possible, to create this narrative of telling people, don't split the vote, or you have to vote for A or B. And at some point, it's going to hit a breaking point, and people are going to say, you know what, I'm done with being played. I'm going to look for a new alternative. Now, that might take 10 years from now. I don't know. But it's inevitable if they continue on the current strategy and not addressing the very real and practical concerns of the average voter. And that doesn't mean we always have to agree on everything. That's why, me and Russell Brand talked about this, that it's not about the left or right economy. This is not 18th century France. That no longer is relevant in our society. It's about a political class that believes they will dictate to us how we think and what our opinions are when we go to the ballot box. Now that worked in the past when media was unidirectional, but media is now bidirectional. So we have as much of a voice in terms of a media when the average person, when we get together and we talk, and the political class needs to realize they need to start to listen. I'm optimistic in the fact that they will. I do think it's just going to take some time. I always tell people who are really anxious. I mentioned this during the convoy when people are like, okay, we want all our mandates and everything ended tomorrow, right? I'm like, listen, that's not how government works. It's like doing a U-turn in a battleship. It's slow, it's laborious. That's just the nature of what it is. That's why I told we were discussing during the protest, everybody just wait, just sit and wait and be patient. The government's not evil. They just got to figure out how they need to reach out to us, and that's it. And I think it's the same with all of this. There's so much opportunity for the political class. There really is, for them to modernize and take a different approach. And instead of labeling people, populist versus establishment or whatever, which is, I guess, kind of what it is, drop the labels and just figure out modern ways to incorporate some of these strategies to reach out to people. Because at the end of the day, this problem is not just in Canada. It's happening all over the world. It's the divide between the urban centers and the rural areas. That's what all of this boils down to. Whether it's France, Spain, Colombia, Canada, it's the same problem all over the world. And if they realize that instead of legislating urban policies in rural jurisdictions, which is what they're doing right now, if they drop that and realize there's really these kind of two cultures that need to work as a symbiotic relationship, maybe gun rights is important for people who live 3 hours north of Kapuskasing where there are bears, but in downtown Toronto, it's a completely different set of problems. But it's going to take a while for the political class to realize that that's what the problem is. And I think once they start to address that, you'll see some of the anxiety over time will begin to subside. So I'm actually quite optimistic.
Okay. Well, yeah, actually, one of my questions, when you're talking about the possible emergence of another political party, and I know you work within the democratic system, and you're not suggesting the government be overthrown.
Never.
Well, tell me, if there was I know that you've also run for the Conservatives, you were, at the founding convention of the People's Party. If there was a third political party and you created it and were in charge of it, what would it stand for? I know that you have strong feelings about, you're kind of towards the absolutist spectrum on freedom of speech. You'd like to get rid of kind of identity politics and all the ascendant policies associated with that. But I'm not clear on what other, especially economic policies, you would support in your dream new political party.
Yeah, I don't have the same.
That's a nice small question.
Yeah, exactly. I really don't have the ambitions to be involved in politics myself. That's why I've told other friends of mine, I still am friends with people in different parties. And I keep telling them, we need to build a path and a runway for rational people like you to run. I don't want to run. That's not my life ambition. But I do think in a modernized world, in the technological world that we live in, and seeing how Generation Z is coming up, moving as they're starting to grow, that there's a shift towards a much more libertarian and freedom approach to government and life, that's their bias. Their bias is not towards we want the government to take care of us. We want the government to leave us alone. And people can do what they want. People want to have different identities or whatever. That's fine. So there's this balance, this symbiotic balance between a level of traditionalism and objective fact. And then there's also people who have their own subjective worldviews. But I think the future of politics is going to be political parties that are much smaller in their scope. It's Pierre Trudeau who famously said there's no room for the government in the bedrooms of a nation, right? That, I think, that's the underlying tone of what Generation Z is, and it's more than just the bedrooms of the nations. It's the kitchens and the households and all that sort of stuff. So from what I know, I mean, maybe this is why I've become a Bitcoiner, and that's what, attracted me to it beyond the technology. From a philosophical standpoint, that any party that chooses that direction chooses to be more libertarian and let people be how they want to be, they're going to have the brighter future. But if they don't do that, then another political party will eventually arise that is going to focus on freedom as its bias and allowing people to live their lives the way they want and without encroachment from the government, which is the opposite of authoritarianism. I mean, I think you saw Jordan Peterson wrote the endorsement for my book. And this is exactly what Peterson, Gadsad, Stephen Hicks, I talk about the three of them frequently because I know them. But this is kind of the underlying philosophical lessons that they're getting out to be. This is why they're so big all over the world, because everybody has a bias towards freedom. Like E.O. Wilson says, the genes hold culture on a leash, right? The culture can say as much as they want, the government is going to protect you and do all of this stuff, but at some point, it gets to a point where it's too much, and people just want to swing back in the complete opposite direction. So if I had a dream political party, please, no thank you, but if I had a dream of what the new or future political party would be, it would have a much more biased understanding towards technology. It would understand theses like Jason Lowry, who explains how Bitcoin will revolutionize our power grid and why it's important. But it will also focus on allowing people to do what they want within certain constraints, obviously, but that the government should be significantly smaller than it is right now. And the era of governments just being a perpetual jobs program for people, unfortunately, that needs to stop. And that brings in some other challenges with automation and universal basic income. Like, I get it. I understand that those are problems too. But I think that's the future of politics. So either the current political class is going to bias in that direction, or they'll just be replaced. And that's just how societies function. It's nothing new.
Okay. So you're not interested in running for politics yourself anymore? You're not currently involved with any political party, if I understand correctly?
No. And I do have friends in various political parties who do reach out to me and ask me for suggestions and ideas once in a while, and I'm always there for them because they're friends, and I just want the country to be better and freer, all right? It's just my perspective and suggestions, and they know I have a long history in marketing and selling messages, and I've done a few things in politics. But no, it is, no, no thank you. So tell them all, I'm not a threat. I'm not trying to take anybody's job. I'm not trying to whatever.
A threat or an asset, I guess, depending on which way you look at it.
That's right.
Okay. And on the topic of selling messages, I had a couple of specific things I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
That you say commonly. One is that you called the Freedom Convoy the largest peaceful protest in Canadian history. I'm wondering how you arrived at that conclusion.
The length of the convoy itself was, and these were bobtail trucks. They're not trucks with trailers attached to them. Some were, but the vast majority weren't. That it was the longest convoy in human history anywhere in the world. It was over
I'm saying it's the largest protest, which is the terminology you used, not the longest in terms of how many tracks.
Yeah. Well, I'm getting to that. So from a messaging standpoint, I'm trying to communicate that the convoy itself was the largest convoy in human history, and I've said also many times the largest peaceful protest in Canadian history. There are some friends of mine. We've been talking about this protest in 1914 in Winnipeg as well, and they did the numbers and. The numbers came back that, no, it wasn't quite as large as this one, and also was sustained for 3 weeks. So that is highly unusual that you would have so many people from across the country in this largest convoy in human history, have tens of thousands of people in Ottawa in minus 40 degrees, and focusing on peace and love and all that. I remember all those times growing up. Woodstock, it was the largest, outdoor concert or whatever, peaceful. They play with the messaging in many different ways. Was it exactly? I don't know, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, I know. I'm just interested because obviously I'm interested in terminology and narratives and so on. And I've covered a lot of protests on Parliament Hill, and they're virtually all peaceful for one thing. And I was just wondering how you came up with the conclusion or the fact that this was the largest. I mean, perhaps it is, but I'm just wondering how you came to that conclusion.
Yeah, just a variety of facts, looking at the number of people. Like, for example, when we were registering trucks, it was funny. They first got, because we actually had a server that was collecting names and registrations and whatever to bring everybody in. And once it got to 36,000 trucks registered, then the server crashed. So they scrambled to get it back up and running, and then the next thing they knew, they had something like 50,000 trucks registered, and then there were individual people that registered who didn't have trucks. And at that point, that's when Chris on the ground told me in Ottawa, he said, we're estimating now approximately 50,000 trucks, because that's what we're seeing in the data that's coming into the server, and 500,000 people in support, including those truckers and support of them. Because, people come with their family. They'll have, they'll drive in their tractor trailer. They'll have their pickup truck and their family behind them, that sort of thing. And he said, when we're looking at the data, because they had a data analyst there who was working for the team, that he explained that, we're looking at about 500,000 people and 50,000 trucks. And so those things cumulatively is how I come to that conclusion.
Well, that's quite a difference from the police estimate. I'm just going on memory here, but I think that they estimated there were maybe 4,000 trucks and vehicles at the peak, and certainly nothing near.
Oh, there were so many trucks outside. We had trucks that are in farmers' fields in Quebec, in Ontario, in southwestern Ontario. People pulled over, went in, I remember at one point we had something like 8,000 or 9,000 trucks in one particular area of Quebec that couldn't get into Ottawa, and we had to figure out, okay, if we can't get them in, how do we get fuel to them or food to them or whatever? And they're sitting in a bunch of different farmer fields. So it was a mess. The Ottawa police force is really disappointing and pathetic as far as I'm concerned. They were doing good. And by the way, I have a brother who's a police sergeant and family in policing. So I'm not new to police culture. I know how police culture works. And even people I knew in policing here were shaking their heads as they said, this is the incompetence that we deal with on a regular basis in policing. And, Chief Slowly came out, what was it, February 3rd, when he said, this requires a political solution, not a, This requires a political solution, not a policing solution. And then within, 24 hours, 48 hours, they put enough pressure on him that he, speaking of policing, they put enough pressure on him that all of a sudden he changed his tune. And Diane Deans started calling us terrorists. It's funny, you don't like when people do it towards you, but you have no problem being so flippant in their language. So, and I think what we saw in the commission as well was exactly what I predicted what was happening. A whole bunch of government institutions doing a whole lot of, it's not my problem, it's their problem. And everybody pointing in a different direction. And, it's the PLT. No, it's the federal government. No, it's the provincial government, which is how government behaves. I've had family growing up that works. I know that's the culture of government here. Everybody takes no responsibility. And that's what we were dealing with there. So I don't take a lot of stock in the Ottawa police. And if you look at their Twitter during the convoy itself, a Twitter account emerged called Ottawa Gestapo. And as Rupa Subramanya said, I couldn't tell which was the parody or which was real. because that's the gross level of incompetence that we have in policing, to the point that the interim police chief has gone so far postmodern subjectivist that he defined during the commission as when he described violence, said, "Oh, I don't mean violence as the criminal code." He promulgated the progressive talking point of words are violence. Like, no. Sticks and stones, they'll break my bones, but names will never hurt me. But it was really pathetic to see a police chief to say something so ludicrous. It was absolutely, I thought it was funny, to be entirely honest.
You're talking about Steve Bell?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you must have found that commission, I think everyone did, just fascinating for allowing a peek behind the scenes of not only government, but police, and also the convoy organization, everyone. The kind of look you rarely get. It was.
It was fascinating and infuriating at the same time, because, as I mentioned, the political class managed to politicize the commission into two camps. There was the narrative from the Liberal Party that said it was Mad Max and pandemonium and death in the streets, which was completely fabricated. And then there was the Conservative Party narrative, which was, it was peaceful, then it got out of hand, which was also a complete lie. It was a little bit of chaos when we arrived because we couldn't handle the volume of problems and fires we needed to put out. But you know what? After a week or so, a few days, everything got smoothed over. We got logistics got control of things. Everything was sorted out, and it got increasingly more peaceful as time went on. And, they were quite surprised and, I guess, disappointed when the commission called me to testify, as well as a few others, who went up and spoke the truth and explained that this was... I'm not towing any political party line. I was just speaking the truth and a lot of what I saw that went on there. And I think over time, it's going to reflect negatively on the political class and how they behaved during the convoy. And the other one is Justice Rouleau. I thought Justice Rouleau was quite fair. I've been defending him quite a lot because I get people on the conservative side. Firstly, they're spreading this rumor that he's related to Trudeau, and they get all the names wrong, and that's not accurate. But the other thing is he gave. Listen, it's the first time anybody had to preside over this legislation. This is his legacy. It's not like he's an up and comer. He's not a startup. He's got a commission with his name on it, and I don't think he's going to tarnish his legacy by being unfair. And he was quite, despite the fact that I was denied standing, and that's more because of my previous counsel, if you want to call it, trying to ensure that I didn't get a voice. But he gave a lot of leeway. He gave all of us leeway. He allowed my lawyer, Jim Kalaharios, to lead me in questions. It was just a few minutes, but it was leeway. So I give him a lot of credit for that.
Okay. Well, here's a question for you. Obviously we have Canadians the right to peaceful protest. Do you think that the convoy should have been allowed to remain on Ottawa streets indefinitely? Or what would you have done if you were in charge of the government response?
Well, if I was...
Obviously, I know they wanted to speak to Justin Trudeau and so on, but I'm just curious about what the limits are. Any school protest.
To be entirely honest, I was shocked that they went on so long trying to hide and run away, and didn't have the courage, the spine, just to talk to us. Like, how many times through Tamara Leach's account did I suggest to Jerry Butts, come down and talk to us, have coffee with us? And it wasn't adversarial. I was, listen, we're all Canadian. Let's talk. Let's explain some of the grievances. And that's it. Like, I'm shocked that politicians go out. Their job is to talk to people. That's their job, to talk to people and represent the government. Yet none of them had the courage just to walk outside their office and say, hey, explain to us what's going on, what can we do for you, whatever. There were a few conservative representatives who did that, but they're not in power, right? It's the responsibility of the person in power. Do you think Pierre Trudeau would have hesitated, and I'm not a fan of his, by the way, but you know, you give people credit where it's due. Do you think Pierre Trudeau would have hesitated to walk out of his office and come right up to our face and sit down and say, okay, what can we do about this? He would have done it immediately, right? Because that's what leadership is. And that's the problem. The political class has been replaced with these cowards who do nothing but run focus groups and regurgitate talking points from lobbyists. That's not leadership. Whether you're left or right, that's not the argument. There's leadership on all sides of the political spectrum. Again, I hate the left-right thing, but it is what it is, right? And that's what we hoped for. Well, that's what we hoped, that at least somebody would have the class and the courage to come out to speak to your average working middle-class Canadian and said, okay, you've done this amazing thing. This is the largest convoy in history. I'm shocked. Let's talk. What do we need to change? What do you want to change? Let me explain why we're doing what we have to do and what our perspective is. Let's hear you. And that's all we needed to do. But for 3 weeks, all they did was come up with different excuses as to why they need to hide. And then they have the gall to come out and talk about leadership. It's insulting.
Yeah, it would have been interesting. I mean, neither of us can know, but if Trudeau or someone else had come out and spoken to the protesters, whether that would have ended protest. Do you think so? Would people? Because of course the protesters didn't want to just have the government listen. They wanted the government to change their policies. I mean, do you think that if Mr. Trudeau came out and listened and then went back and nothing changed, the protest would have ended?
I think what made it unique and different is the fact that it was a temporary policy. And that's the difference. It's not like the truckers were coming there to change, I don't know, monetary policy for the entire country. This was a temporary policy that was quite egregious and affected many people quite aggressively. But as I explained in many interviews, the UK already had dropped its mandates recently, like a few weeks before, as did many other countries. And I said I think it was a GB News interview or a Fox News interview, one of them. And I said, all we want is the Canadian government to do what the rest of the country, the rest of the world is starting to do. That's it. That's all we want. So this should have been a win for them. This could have been such a massive PR opportunity for the Liberal government to come out and say, they say I hate Alberta. They say we dislike the West. We came out to meet with the truckers. We talked to them. We've come up with a timeline that everybody can understand. We've listened to each other, and this is how we're going to move forward, and everybody's happy. That would have been a massive PR win for the Liberal Party. And I can't believe they shot themselves in the foot. But again, when you don't have leadership and you don't have people who can think in a way to understand what your opposition thinks, then you have disastrous outcomes like this.
Interesting. I obviously we'll never know. You didn't answer my question about whether you think that the trucks and the vehicles should have been allowed to remain in the streets indefinitely.
I don't think that's practical anyways. As I said, sometimes in my messaging, I use hyperbole as a tool intentionally. Technically a truck could stay there for 2-3 years if it's got an APU and it's got enough fuel and people are sending it, and we manage to get food to them. Yeah, a truck can stay there indefinitely. But they're forgetting something, and this just goes to show how the political class is oblivious to how the struggles and the tribulations, I guess you will, of people who are middle class, working class business people, is they got businesses to run. They can't sit there forever. Like, yeah, we'll be there for a few weeks, we'll be there, whatever. But at the end of the day, everybody at some point needs to get back to work, which is why they wanted these mandates dropped. It's not like, oh, it was just a pet project we don't like these mandates, so we're going to Ottawa. It's like, no, you're killing my business because I can't get cross-border business anymore. My balance sheet is on fire now because I can't deal with clients in the US. That's why I have to go there to get these mandates reversed so I can keep my existing client base. That's what this was about. And the fact that they don't understand that is shocking. They're going to sit there for years. Like, yeah, technically we could have. You really think they were going to? Like, come on. Everybody, all those trucks have logos and DOT stickers on the side and permits to operate. They're businesses. They need to get back to work. Drop the mandate so we can get back to work. That's all they wanted. It was such an easy win for them. I can't believe, much like the Conservatives, the Liberals too cannot score on an empty net. It's just shocking.
Well, it is interesting how it developed because during the week, as I'm sure you know, the number of protesters dwindled down to, at one point they were actually counted about 400 people or 400 vehicles. So it was just fascinating watching how it just continued on.
Well, we also had people coming and going. So the following weekend, the weekend that the government decided to turn into a banana republic, I had 60 NHL players that were getting on their private jets to fly to Ottawa that wanted to meet with all the truckers. Jordan Peterson produced a video. A number of other people produced videos. Some celebrities were reaching out to me and wanted to come to Ottawa and participate. So, and then at the same time, there was a group of Liberal MPs, and this is why I keep telling everybody on the Conservative side, find friends who have differing political values than you. We need to talk to one another. But there was I was told it was 33 MPs in the Liberal caucus that were forming a coalition and going towards a non-confidence vote for Justin Trudeau. And I think that's why they invoked the EMA. It was a political stunt because they realized that his own caucus was unhappy, and he subsequently replaced them with 30 NDP MPs and froze them out of the conversation. But I think that's what they're trying to hide, is the fact that they invoked the EMA because his own caucus was starting to turn against him.
And that was another one of my questions. You mentioned that in your podcast, I think you said around 40. What's your source for that? I'm not.
You're a journalist. You know I'm not giving up my source.
Okay. I was also wondering. You talked earlier about the JCCT and their fundraising and so on. Tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, reading on Twitter and so on, it seems like some people are suggesting that law firm is raising money and they're questioning what's happening to the money that's being raised. Put it that way. What do you know about that?
Well, it's not a law firm. The JCCF is not a law firm. They're just they're an advocacy firm of some sort. They and tied to the Conservative Party, very closely tied to the Conservative Party. They apparently raised $5 million for defending the truckers, and all I know is
when you say they raised $5 million, is this on their website they're raising it, or I know that at some point I think it was Keith Wilson. I'm sorry, I don't remember whether it was at the Inquiry or elsewhere, said that some wealthy guy from the U.S. generously gave can't remember, quite a large sum of money, which he then passed along to the truckers. So there's I know there are various ways they were collecting money. So when you say $5 million, what do you mean? Is that the money they were publicly collecting, or?
From what I'm told, and I can reach out to my source for clarification because somebody went through their balance sheet and their filings and all that sort of stuff, that they disclosed that they now have $1.7 million in assets. And that's what I thought. I thought they raised $1.7 million. And my source said to me, no, they raised $5 million. 1.7 was the assets they had listed. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Because they were doing they did the event with Tamara Leach The Freedom Award, which I told everybody, don't do this. The government is politicized. They're going to use this as action against her. And then somebody who, brain doesn't function, jumped in a picture with her, and she got arrested, which is exactly what I said would happen, which is why I didn't go. So they did these different events. They had people raising money for a variety of different means, I guess. And it's ended up with them raising $5 million. And is, from what I understand, is for the purpose of helping the truckers, the convoy, defending the truckers and convoy. Yet, I don't know. Chris Guerra, Chad, none of us have seen a dime of it. So I'd like to know where that money is. And if they need wiring instructions from my lawyer, we'll be glad to get them to them.
Okay. Maybe I should try to reach Chad Earls. He seems to be the one with the kind of the details about some of that financing and so on.
Well, he's a CPA, and he was the one who was so he'd probably be the best person to talk to about that. But he wasn't my source for the $5 million. If you want, I can reach out to my source and see if I can get you a call.
Okay. Some of the division we're seeing among the various people and groups. Do you think? Movements. There's always division. It's not uncommon. How damaging, or do you think it's damaging to the movement itself? So a lot of energy is being spent on infighting, at least as far as I can tell on social media. Although a lot of some of the people doing the infighting it's hard to tell how influential they actually are.
Yes, true. I think it's like what's the analogy? A friend of mine says, people are like, the people. They're okay to. Let me put it this way. There are certain people who latched on to the freedom movement, to the freedom convoy, to, in my opinion, disrupt and sabotage it, and then defame and engage in reputation destruction against the rest of us. And then once they feel they have the momentum, it's like, oh, well, now we need to unify. Like, no, that's not the way it works. It's kind of like the analogy that I was given. Imagine the Canadian military has a mole from the Chinese government within it, sharing intelligence to the Chinese government. Well, the first thing you do is you expunge the saboteur, and then you unify. And that's the state that we're in right now. And what you're seeing is a lot of people, burner accounts that are connected to the political class. You'll notice many of them will have, 50 followers, 100 followers, whatever. You'll see burner account bots. You can tell it's an API script that's being run that will call people names and and try to protect the very people that we're critical of. And that's a common strategy that's used by all political institutions nowadays. And you're going to see this period of people pushing back, those of us, as I said, who are the majority of the Freedom Convoy board, who are fed up with us, who are speaking out. And at some point, the people will realize that, hey, we're actually telling the truth. And I've had a lot of people do that. And so much so that even yesterday, there was somebody who's connected to one of these fake parties. They're testing messaging. You can always tell when political people are testing messaging. And the new narrative that they're spinning, and these are the people who were integrally involved in the narrative during the testimony. Now they're starting to say, well, we tried to have a deal with the city, but the city wasn't interested. Oh, really? Because that's not what you said during the testimony. During the testimony, you said there was a deal, and Dichter is the one to blame. So I can see already through the messaging that the momentum is turning against them. And over time, listen, was it Twain said that a lie goes around the world twice before the truth gets its shoes on? Well, that's the stage we're at right now, and over time, people will understand the truth, and I'm very optimistic about that. So this I call it the artificial division. The division, what you're seeing is the political operatives who really engaged in disrupting the convoy are losing control over their narrative. So what do? They have to attack the rest of us. And over time, people will understand that, okay, this was just political ops doing what political operatives do, and people understand the truth. Again, that's why there's a book about it that explains, again, I don't get into, have you read the book yet or no?
No, I'm sorry. I will I will read it.
You must. There's going to give you a lot of insight that you were unaware of. But it's also all the positive stories. Like, I don't really focus on the negative stuff because there was too much chaos for us to really deal with, people's grievances. We just had so many problems to deal with. And I put together all the positive stories that went on. And I think that's what people are going to see over the future. And to answer your earlier question, that's going to be the legacy of the convoy.
Okay. I have read Andrew Lawton's book as well as Quiggins' book, and both of them, particularly Quiggins' book, was really a good guide, behind the scenes guide to some of the people involved and so on. But who apart from the burner accounts and so on, who are these political operators that were trying to sabotage the movement? Are you talking about people who are visible? I can't count the number of times I've read on, various social media accounts, people accusing each other. And I'm talking about the more, I don't want to use the word fringe, but some of the groups surrounding James Bowder and so on, accusing each other of being...
Yes. I know. Everybody's a Fed, an op. Yeah, I know. CIA. It's so funny. Yeah, people who don't understand how the world actually works. It's much...
But you seem to be saying there are political... I don't know if you're talking about Tom Marazzo. Of course, I've heard people say that he is some kind of secret agent as well. Who are these political operatives? Are you talking about people who are just doing the burner accounts and are way behind the scenes trying to craft narratives? Are you talking about actual people involved in the groups?
Both. So there's an entire network that has been working for many, many years to ensure that grassroots operations like the Freedom Convoy don't get momentum, that they get crushed, that, like I learned when I was involved with the Conservative Party, how many times every day I would hear this phrase, we got to control the messaging. We got to control the messaging. That's all they focus on. Forget governing. We just got to control messaging. And there are various groups, individuals, big donors, political donors, who, you can't give more than $1,600 to a political party, but you can give an ungodly amount of money to create a fake proxy organization that will promulgate a political narrative. And this is not unique to the Conservative Party. This also happens in the Liberal Party. This is where it comes from, because so many of these people used to be liberals. That's where they learned how this operates. So I'm actually I'm working on a project over the next several months that I'm going to be explaining this entire network and how it all operates. It's not something I can do kind of, an information vomit right here and everybody will understand, because it's really intricate how it all works. But in the example of Tom Marazzo, it's so funny that people can't see through him. He said, people were asking him last week when he started attacking me that, Dichter's a Fed. He didn't say it exactly that word. People said it. He's like, well, yeah, I've had some questions about him. I'm like, excuse me, you're ex-military. By definition, you are Fed. Like, it's so crazy that people can't...
I have a question about that. What does it mean to be a Fed?
Oh, okay. So this is internet culture, internet vernacular, if you will, where they refer to somebody as, it's kind of a joke meme you see online that somebody's a Fed. It means it came from the U.S. That's why you hear the term Fed all the time. But it means they work for the government, that they are... they're.
It doesn't mean informer or spy. It just means that they work for the government. I
Yeah.
The context is really strange to me.
I know, because people kind of use it interchangeably. It's kind of like when people use liberal and progressive interchangeably and not distinguishing the difference. They do the same thing with that.
I'm more familiar with it in the context of drugs, like...
Yeah, for sure. No, that's not what they're referring to.
They're not really the drug dealer that you think they are.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, I'd be very interested in that. Can I ask you another kind of a random question? That's something you were mentioning in your podcast. What is a soft poll? You were talking about the proxy organizations, the fake NGOs that do research based on soft polls that the political classes then use. What's a soft poll?
Yeah, a soft poll is an influencer poll. It's a poll designed not to actually get people's opinion. It's a poll designed to actually persuade people's opinion in a different direction.
Okay, I know what you mean. Then I just
Yeah.
I hadn't heard the term. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's nothing new. I mean, a lot of
No.
things that you're describing, it didn't just start happening. In the last even when the Liberals took power, all these things have been in place in government for a long time. So if I understand you correctly, you just think that they're getting more intense.
Well, no, they get amplified because as any technology becomes digitized, then it expands exponentially, right? So you would have seen this in generations in the past, but you wouldn't seen it to this level, and it wasn't nearly as quick as it is today, and that's what telecommunications and the internet has done to it. But yeah, this is not something new. What is different is because of the changing nature of media, that it's bidirectional, is now we can see it. The problem is there's a lot of people who buy into any conspiracy theory. So everything now becomes a conspiracy, which that too is not accurate, right? So Stephen Hicks explained this really well. He thinks this is just the first generation of humans that are really dealing with international instant telecommunications and an internet. And we're just learning how to navigate it. A lot of us we're still learning how to distinguish between what is objectively true and what is just narrative. And it's going to take time till we really get our foothold. Take a couple of generations. But yeah, no, these tactics are not new. It's just the rapid rate at which they're deployed is very new and unique.
That's interesting. And also the very concept of truth. I mean, I'm always interested in this trend towards people, the kind of the underlying idea that truth is totally subjective, as in I tell my truth.
Oh, yeah.
You tell your truth, as opposed to, I mean, obviously, nothing is apart from 2 plus 2.
Yeah.
It's hard to say exactly what the truth is, but abandoning any attempt to try to determine in an independent way what happened, for instance, somewhere, or kind of what we would traditionally be seen as truth. That's among some anyway. It doesn't even seem to be a goal. It's like it doesn't matter. You have your truth. I have my truth. It becomes just a belief, like a faith or a religion or something.
100%, and it's very, it's really disconcerting. And again, I mentioned Jordan Peterson and Gad Saad. Stephen Hicks is really, I don't know if you know who he is. He's a star in academia around the world because he wrote the book Explaining Postmodernism, I think early 2000s.
It's on my list. I'm sorry I haven't read it yet, but I do know the name, and it's on my list to read.
Once you understand postmodernist philosophy, then Justin Trudeau becomes very, very easy to predict. And, some people on the conservative side, they get upset with me. I don't think he's evil. I think he is. I think he's. Well, firstly, he's not qualified for the job. But I think what he is, he's a postmodernist. He's a subjectivist. Everything is your truth versus my truth, and that's a very dangerous direction for us to go in a society. We can all have our subjective feelings. I get that. People have subjective feelings around the Freedom Convoy. But we also need to speak about the objective truth of what happened, and that's what I'm trying to do. That's why I'm so frustrated with certain elements in legacy media. That's why I didn't bring them into our press conferences, with the exception of Rupa. And she was recommended to me by some people in the legacy media as who would be an honest actor. And she was great, and I really appreciate it. And she initially was not so sure either until she started walking the streets and realized that, no, these people are lovely. And I think we got to go back to that. So, yeah, we can all have our subjective feelings. And if we understand that we have our subjective feelings, but we got to at least agree on the facts, and then we can address how we all feel, then we'll be better off moving forward. But replacing objectivism with subjectivism will destroy our society.
I would love to see an actual quantitative survey of the so-called, mainstream media coverage of the convoy in Ottawa that looks exactly at, because the narrative I hear from from you and other people is that the mainstream media as a whole, it's always, the mainstream media, and I don't know whether, I'm assuming that people are blending opinion columnists, news columnists, editorials, everything, which of course is kind of not a very nuanced way to look at it.
Yeah.
But what the coverage actually showed, whether it did always portray the convoy as, violent, racist, sexist, and so on. I would be very interested in an actual analysis of the coverage.
Agreed. And, I think, dating, just to address this a little bit further, where the problem lies, because you do bring up the interesting point of legacy media, the opinion column versus, the front page. But that's the problem. And I had a long conversation with Peter Kent about this when he was an MP. But we didn't talk about politics. I actually was very curious his opinions on media and how media has changed and how the news has changed and all that sort of stuff. And we had a great conversation, about an hour. And he said to me, I'll always remember this. He said to me, I think the problem started in the late, I think he said the late 80s, when you first started to see legacy media put opinion columns on the front page. And that was the beginning of the end. Before then, there was a hard distinction. There's the opinion section, and then there's the objective news section. And once they started to merge those two together, obviously we're going to be in the position that we're in right now, where now people don't know what is opinion, what is truth, what is objective, what is fact. And this is nothing new. Like anybody who's a student of literature will know, if you go back a few hundred years ago, there was no fiction or nonfiction. Those did not exist. There were just books. And we developed this system where we could distinguish between the two and classify the two. But now we seem to be going in the opposite direction, going back to this sort of murky interweaving of fact and fiction. And I think if the legacy media does a much better job of focusing on just objective reporting and having a very, very distinguished opinion section, and that it's clear and it's obvious and everybody understands that, I think that's how legacy media will start to turn the corner and go back to where they are. But when they and they misuse it on social media, when they put on Twitter, the Globe and Mail puts a story on Twitter that the Freedom Convoy, the white supremacists are weaponizing freedom. I think that was the tenor of they used white supremacists and freedom, whatever. When they put that on their social media and they don't put, hashtag opinion or in big letters, opinion pieces, then of course people are going to lose trust in them. Now, I could see that when I click on it. I could see the URL has the word opinion in it, but most people are not reading this long, this long script of this URL to see that it's opinion, and that's what's causing it.
Well, that's an interesting example. I'm gonna go look at our social media. I don't always look at it. I know that I know exactly what you're talking about. The kind of separation of opinion and news, and of course it's exacerbated by the fact that the number of actual news reporters has declined so drastically.
Yeah.
That that's a large part of it, I think, because there still are news reporters, and the way they actually operate has not substantially changed in decades, really. I mean, it changed a bit probably in the late 70s with new journalism and so on. But for the average reporter, they're operating the same way they did 20 years ago.
But they're also being beholden to their editors. So I'll give you an example. I think I can talk about this. I don't think he'll get upset because he told me to talk about it. One particular reporter, I'm not going to say his name blatantly for him to get in trouble. I don't think he will. But he reported on the horse trampling of Candace Sarah. And it got through his editors, got in the newspaper, and he subsequently, the next day, received 2 calls from cabinet members of the Liberal Party telling him to change the story. And he said, why? Well, because there were bicycles and the bicycles scared the horses. And he said, I'm not changing the story. Sorry, I was there. I saw what happened. And he got multiple phone calls from people in his organization, very high up, all telling him to change the story that the bicycles scared the horses. Now, none of these geniuses could figure out that those are crowd control horses. They're trained not to be scared by horses or tear gas or loud noises. That's why they're crowd control horses. So that narrative is dead on arrival. So instead, he stuck to his guns like an old school, objective reporter, said, I'm not changing it. So what did his company do? They had two other journalists write stories who are bought off to not directly refute his claims, but to say there were some people there who might have gotten a different perspective. There's that subjectivism, right? But there are other people who said the horses were scared by the bicycles. A complete fabrication and a total fabrication at the behest of the political class. If you're a journalist, the political class shouldn't like you. They really shouldn't. You should be adversarial towards them. But that's not the world that we live in, and that needs to change.
That's a very interesting anecdote. I would be curious about that. The source in the paper, and because honestly, I mean, I've been an editor and reporter for decades, and I have never. I mean, a lot of times people are upset by what you write, and you might get a call from anyone saying, I don't agree with that, and I certainly try to listen to them, and I think if they have a point, and absolutely, if there's a factual error, or sometimes even it's a wording change. I mean, with the Freedom Convoy, I do actually try to listen to people. I mean, not the people that are sending death threats, but
well, hey, we got them too. That's why me and Tamara had to keep changing hotel rooms because we kept getting death threats.
Yeah, but anyway, I just this is again anecdotally my experience, and I know a lot of journalists, and certainly my organization. And it's been through all kinds of owners. I mean, we had Conrad Black owning it. We had the Southern family, who were more, I don't know what their politics were.
Yeah.
But and now a hedge fund, whoever it is that owns us now, I have never, ever had any editor tell me for political reasons that I had to change a story or, order someone else to write a story with a.
Oh, I know a few people in legacy.
People don't believe me. I tell them that.
Yeah.
I mean, people who have this entrenched in their head about the way we work, they just don't believe me.
Well, I know some other legacy media journalists who've told me the same thing, but that also doesn't mean it's happened to you. So yeah, it can happen to other people, but also not happen to you and not happen to others. I mean, that's the problem when we collectivize people, right?
Widespread. I mean, you stated. I mean, I've heard people actually say they believe that the Liberal government or Justin Trudeau himself is calling into the newsroom, telling us what to write, which is an extremely unsophisticated way of looking at how news works. But and that anyway, it's all anecdotal. I mean, I suppose you'd have to do a survey of every reporter and ask them.
There's a reason when people leave the Toronto Star, they had such a strict binding NDA that they could never talk about the Toronto Star. There's a reason for that, right?
Yeah, I can't speak for the Toronto Star. I mean, I know a few people who work there, but I never worked there. So I don't know what the culture is and how things work.
Yeah, for sure.
But anyway, that's quite an interesting story.
Yeah.
Is there? I'm sorry, I've taken so much of your time.
One more question, and I got to run because I got to get to Jersey. It's running late. Wow, we're already at 11 o'clock. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. I have covered everything I need to cover for this current story, and I appreciate you chatting about other subjects. Is there anything else that you'd like to say?
No, the only thing right now that I'm concerned about is let's celebrate Valentine's Day in a way that's classy. Let's show the world that Canada is classy. Let's celebrate love. We can address the fact that the government turned authoritarian and was quite extreme in their incompetence. And that's why I often say they're so incompetent, they're dangerous at this point. But let's not allow that to break our spirit. Let's get together across Canada in our towns, our cities, our hamlets, our whatever it is. And let's make it peaceful, and let's love each other. Let's meet new people, and let's show that's the spirit of the Freedom Convoy. And if we have a successful, I call it the Honk Honk Valentine's Day, then maybe that's going to become a tradition in Canada. And I think that would be great over the long term of bringing people together. And even those that were confused and weren't sure of what was going on, eventually they'll understand that this was in everybody's best interest. And the last thing to tell you, I don't know if you saw this video I put it on my Instagram and on my Twitter. When I came out of the commission, there was a woman who was, she had a pride flag. She had a sign that said honk honk, and she was calling me, Benji the terrorist, you're a terrorist, Benji, the truckers are terrorists, and blah, 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 blah. So I turned on my Instagram, and I started recording a video, and I said, I don't know who she is. She probably, in my estimation, has many different colored hair or something. She's probably a wonderful person, but the Freedom Convoy protected her right for free speech as it protected all of our rights for free speech. And that's why what we did was important.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, and reach out to me anytime if you need anything further.
Thank you. Safe travel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, so those of you who lasted all this time on Twitter, any comments? Because I'm going to have to shut down in a minute. I got to get down to the U.S. Raise a hand if you have a question, if you want to ask anything. If not, I'm going to go. And what do you think? I thought she was quite practical for a legacy media journalist with her questions. I've had that in the past where I've done legacy media interviews. They seem to go well. And then, the piece comes out and the editor works out and it's the complete opposite of what we discussed. I don't think, and I hope that that's not the case. Jackie's a journalist for the Ottawa Citizen, by the way, for those of you who are curious who that was. And that was first time I've done a legacy media interview in quite some time, because I'm intentionally keeping away from them. But I figured, hey, let's give them a chance and see if we can help them turn the corner and be more objective in their reporting. So let's see what happens. Let's see what the outcome is. All right, no questions on Twitter. I'm going to shut it down. There's a bunch of things here. Oh, my God, there's so many comments on good morning. Okay, everybody who's on YouTube, good morning. I'm sorry I didn't get to address you and say hello. I couldn't do that interview and address your comments and questions, but I love you all. Okay, you guys all talking to each other. Honk Honk Valentine's Day. I'm telling you, that's the key. Let's celebrate positivity and love around some trucks and some barbecues on Valentine's Day, and let's get people doing that across Canada and even the U.S. That would be an amazing message and a PR disaster for our authoritarians in government, and would send a message. All right, everybody, I'm going to shut it down. I love you all. You're great for being here. Thank you. And I got to run to where am I going today? To New Jersey. And I will be here soon. I'll talk to you soon. And DJ, thanks for being here, brother. I'm sorry I couldn't be in your space last night. I just had so many things going on. But we will connect sometime soon, brother. All right? Have a great day, everybody. And be kind to everyone else. And be peaceful. It's going to make you feel good. And we'll talk soon. All right.